How you guys all doing? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is Thursday, June the 20th, and on today's show, we're going to be going over some more stuff regarding the NFL, obviously, but more around the topic of some new places, some new situations for some of the players I have in store today. Starting off with Matthew Stafford, looking for a new contract, potentially a raise in that new contract, whereas before it was understood that he just wanted more guaranteed money. That could be bumped up as well on his annual salary. Then we're going to move on and talk about Austin Ekeler in his new location with the Washington Commanders. Why did he decide to leave from the Los Angeles Chargers? That'll be discussed later on. And also Amari Cooper and the Cleveland Browns, talking about a new contract with him. How much could he be looking to get, and what did their general manager have to say about the entire situation, about Amari Cooper holding out so far through this offseason, plus much more on today's show. So remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And as a final reminder, if you have any questions or comments you want to make, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. By using that link, I'm able to see your question or comment and read it online, and that way, get your guys' perspective, any thoughts you have to say on what I say or any of the topics on today's show. It's a massive help for the show and also the network, so if you guys would, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. We would greatly appreciate it every time you guys are able to do that. But like I mentioned, going back to the first topic, starting off with Matthew Stafford, another quarterback that isn't talked about too much in the media circles about getting a new contract extension, because his doesn't really stem from trying to find new validation, some new contract worth. With everybody getting a ton of money now, obviously, Stafford's is a little bit different because he's looking more so for the guaranteed money. That's what's most important for him at this point in his career, because he is now 36 years old. And as far as we know, Stafford, unlike any of the other quarterbacks or most of the quarterbacks, he has also shown up to the mandatory minicamp. He hasn't really shown any signs of holding out. Now, once training camp comes, that could be a little different if he does decide to not show up, but he hasn't given any indication of that. And even though it's been known that he has wanted his contract adjusted, that's the term that everyone's been using for Matthew Stafford. In 2024, Stafford is set to make $31 million guaranteed, but then after that, in the final year or so of his contract, there's no more guaranteed money left. And that's obviously a problem once you get closer to the other half of 30s, maybe closer to 40. You could sustain more injuries more often than not, and you want to get that security, obviously. That makes sense, but his average annual salary also with his current contract is set at about $40 million, and outside of the top 10 in the highest paid quarterback rankings, the next highest paid after all the quarterbacks that make $50 million per year is Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray currently makes $46 million per year, and then you have Matthew Stafford all the way back at $40 million per year. And honestly, going off of how much they're worth, if they're worth as much as their contract, I don't think there's over 10 quarterbacks better than Matthew Stafford. Off the top of my head, I could probably name 6 or 7, but then it's really hard to put anybody ahead of Matthew Stafford. Even at 36 years old, I think he still gives a great chance for any team. If he was on any team, I think he would give them a great chance to still be as good as they were with any other quarterback in the league. So that's one thing, but we're really talking about the guaranteed money. And like I mentioned, he just turned 36, so how much guaranteed money are the Los Angeles Rams willing to give him at this point in his career? Now, also a potential raise has been brought up recently because some sources around the NFL are looking at these other quarterback contracts, all these, massive explosions in how much these quarterbacks earn nowadays. And Matthew Stafford might be looking at it, and he hasn't come out and said it. Obviously, no one would really expect him to do that, but with Trevor Lawrence getting a ton of money, Jared Goff, now you have Tua, Dak, and Tua, Dak, and Jordan Love. That's another maybe three quarterbacks that could be making $50 to $40 million, and then that would just push Matthew Stafford further down the line. So at that point, if you're going to negotiate some more guaranteed money, why not negotiate some more money just on an average annual salary that could be coming your way? And that's where this has sort of taken a turn a little bit, according to Ian Rappaport, reporting on the situation by saying, the breakdown essentially here is that Stafford, my understanding is, wants more guaranteed money. It doesn't sound like he would mind a raise either. He wants his contract adjusted, and that is reasonable to believe for a few reasons that I will get to in just a few seconds. But the biggest issue with that at 36 years old right away is that age, the injury factor, with Matthew Stafford sustaining an injury back in 2022 as most recently. That does scare you a little bit, but then in 2023 he came back, almost recorded 4,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. He led the Los Angeles Rams back into the playoffs with an exciting new team. He's really become the leader, the voice of reason in there, especially now with Aaron Donald retiring. He is one of the elder members of that locker room, and he just garners a lot of respect. I think when anybody comes in, all these young rookies, all these young players that they just have in general, once Matthew Stafford talks, once you see him come into the room, he has a different aura around him. He has a different energy that just, makes people respect him, and I think he has earned that, and keeping him on the team does nothing but good things for the Los Angeles Rams, obviously. There were some talks about maybe the Rams thinking of moving on from him, not really trying to give him much more guaranteed money, but Sean McVay has shut down all those rumors of moving on from Matthew Stafford. It seems like they're very comfortable with him leading them for the next year to 3 years, however long he wants to play. That's up to him, but Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay seem to be on the same page as to wanting to stay with the Rams, but obviously Stafford wants a little bit more guaranteed money, and that is the most important thing. Talking about a raise, I think that could be secondary, just because I think Stafford doesn't really worry about being the highest paid quarterback at this point in his career. He knows and he acknowledges that he is closer to the finish line than the start or the prime, I guess, of his career. So that isn't the most important thing right now for the Rams, which is a benefit because obviously that we're talking about a lot of money. And in all honesty, if you're talking about resumes and who deserves $55 million per year, Matthew Stafford could definitely make a great argument for that. But that's not something that he's worried about too much right now. The guaranteed money still remains the number one, but at this point, not only does it make sense to try and keep Matthew Stafford, I think it'll get done in the end, but it just comes down to the fact that he deserves it, really, first and foremost, for delivering them that Super Bowl once they made that big blockbuster trade to get rid of Jared Goff, bring in Matthew Stafford, and really invest so much years of first-round picks into Matthew Stafford. It was a big gamble just because nobody really knew too much about Cooper Kupp. Aaron Donald was great, but that defense could really perform up to that standard. The quarterback was the main issue, but then he came in, put all the pressure on his shoulders, and then delivered back there when he won the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals. And just his performance overall, I think, really recognized as one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL, and now he is on a great team. He is getting that recognition, and he just deserves it from what I've seen him play, from I think what everybody feels that he deserves to be getting paid. And then bumping him up to, I think, if we're talking now a raise in his contract and how much that could go up to, I think potentially 44 to 46 would be all right for Matthew Stafford. Again, any amount he would probably make a good case of saying that he deserves it, but I think going up to and matching Kyler Murray's $46 million per year, or just going over that a little bit, maybe not so much into the 50s because, like I mentioned, he is closer to the end, but going to maybe 46, 44, if you want to push it a little bit more to 48, but that's as high as I would go for Stafford, and I think that's an ideal landing spot that he would also agree upon because Kyler is the highest earning quarterback that's not making $50 million, so it doesn't come down to who's better. I think that's a pretty consensus vote. So if you were to bump it up that much by $5 million, $6 million even, I think Stafford would agree to that, and it would just push all this talk about that contract and getting the guaranteed money out of the way. Will it happen? I think it will happen. When it will happen, if Stafford is going off of what we've seen and everyone's going off of the fact that he's going to show up to training camp, I think it'll carry on towards the middle of August, potentially after the preseason a little bit, because it seems like no one's in that big of a rush. But if Stafford shows any sort of change in behavior that he is maybe thinking about missing training camp if this doesn't get resolved finally, then it'll be a little bit more of a pressurized situation, a bit more of a rush. So they're going to have to play it by ear. Everything's going to just have to be off of a feel of how the vibe's going with Matthew Stafford. But I think he has shown that he doesn't really care too much right now. It's out there that he wants it. He has told the organization that he wants his contract adjusted. Now it's just up to them and how much they're willing to wait. Testing Matthew Stafford's patience a little bit if they wait too long. So they're just going to have to go off of the feeling of it. I think he'll get it, but when that is still remains the biggest question. But on that note, we will move on to the first break of the show. And when we return, we're going to talk about Austin Ekeler finding a new home in Washington. But why did he leave the Los Angeles Chargers after having very successful seasons in the past? They arguably get rid of their best playmaker. Why that is, Austin Ekeler explains it a little bit more this past weekend, and we're going to get into that when we return. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk about the contract, or not the contract situation, but a new situation, this time with Austin Ekeler, a running back, a premier running back over the last 3 seasons, I would say, for the majority of that. Arguably the Los Angeles Chargers' main playmaker for Justin Herbert, for just how efficient that offense was, at least over the last 2 of the last 3 years. So this year, it was a bit of a surprise, at least to me, when Austin Ekeler decided to move on to a different team. With Jim Harbaugh coming in and the excitement around that, I thought they could find a spot for Austin Ekeler. And it sounds crazy to put it that way, as if Austin Ekeler wasn't this great offensive weapon. But, it just didn't work out for some reason. And now we've sort of got those answers here provided by Austin Ekeler. But to give you guys some more context as to why at least I'm holding Austin Ekeler to some high regard, is because over the last 2 years before 2023, so in 2022 and in 2021, Austin Ekeler recorded very efficient and very impressive offensive numbers for the Los Angeles Chargers, even though they didn't have the most impressive team seasons in those years. Austin Ekeler surely wasn't the reason behind that. Over those years in 21 and in 2022, he recorded at least over 1,500 yards from scrimmage in each of those years, no less than 18 touchdowns in each of those years as well, and he recorded a total of 177 receptions combined in those 2 seasons and playing at least 16 games. So it's not like he was missing any time, really. For all the attention he was getting, for all the workload that he was putting into these games, he still played 16 seasons, basically all games in that regular season. So it seemed an ideal and a perfect situation that you would want with a running back. But then in 2023, it all went downhill, just like really the majority of the Los Angeles Chargers did as a team. All those stats that I just mentioned dropped pretty significantly. His scrimmage yards were only barely over 1,000 yards, so he recorded, I want to say, 600-something yards rushing and just 400 passing. Then he only recorded 6 total touchdowns, 51 receptions, and played 14 games, so that's a positive, but just the production wasn't there anymore like it was in the 2 previous years, and that ended up being the lasting impression that Ekeler left with the Chargers, and now them really clearing house, getting rid of not only Ekeler, but Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, and some other weapons for Justin Herbert there, putting them in a weird situation, but sometimes the hardest decisions like this turn out to be the best ones by just ripping off that Band-Aid and making these tough decisions. And now Austin Ekeler finds himself in Washington. Of all places, he joins Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, owner Josh Harris in this brand new Washington Commanders team in 2024. They brought in Jaden Daniels to be their franchise quarterback. A lot of excitement around him, and I think Austin Ekeler can provide a lot of a dynamic, feeling to this, a dynamic aspect to this offense. But he recently appeared on the Up and Adams show this past week, and we finally got some answers as to why he decided to leave the Los Angeles Chargers, why that partnership wasn't going to work anymore, because it did really confuse me, like I mentioned before. And this is what Austin Ekeler actually had to say about the situation. If you guys see it there on your screen, he said, "I think you can see how they've been building the team so far this offseason. Went out and drafted a tackle first round, brought in some bigger backs over from Baltimore. So it's like, hey, they want a guy that they can hand the ball off to 300 times a year. And look, I haven't had the capacity to do that. That's not my game." Ekeler has had a career high of 206 carries at one time in his career. So the fit with Jim Harbaugh, and everybody knows how Jim Harbaugh plays, at least from his time in Michigan, very much in your face, winning the trenches, and just bullying you with a great offensive line, a very dominant defensive line, and just winning the game of attrition that way. And I don't think most people would name Austin Ekeler as their first candidate of running back to fit that system. And he was pretty honest about it, pretty transparent that, he accepts that wasn't going to fit. He's not capable of doing that. There wasn't any problems, nothing personal there. It was just a business decision, a work decision that just didn't fit him anymore. So with that, he brings his talent over to Washington. And that statement a little bit, saying that's not my game anymore, and saying, he hasn't had the capacity to do that anymore, having 300 carries, might rub people the wrong way or just give off the wrong impression, because it makes you ask yourself, if he's saying that about himself, his own game, while it might be honest, and it could be the truth, honestly, he's just being very honest, how confident does that make anybody looking at Austin Ekeler and the Washington Commanders now? How confident is anyone that Austin Ekeler can find a new sort of best version of himself with Washington? And what does that even look like now? If he's not able to carry the ball that much, if he's not able maybe to rush over 1,000 yards, just rushing instead of just scrimmage yards, what does this new version of Austin Ekeler sort of look like in Washington? It is interesting to think about here, and Eric says, so does Jim Harbaugh want a younger roster? He built up Michigan from the ground up. So is this the mentality that he needs to make the Los Angeles Chargers a Super Bowl contender? That could be a way to do it, a younger roster. I think that's a way that he has built it up a little bit through the draft, bringing in Joe Alt. From the receiver standpoint, you bring in Ladd McConkey. You still have Quentin Johnson. I still have my doubts about him. It is a weird situation with them just because it's very unorthodox in today's NFL, because everybody seems to focus around the pass, the motion offense, very deceptive, very scheme oriented, and it's very pass heavy, very quarterback friendly, and that's what they were running already with Justin Herbert being the main catalyst to all that. But you saw how those results didn't really pan out, and the Chargers were, I wouldn't say a laughing stock, but at some point, with Justin Herbert, with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Ekeler, and that defense, it's not like the defense doesn't have anybody else either. They have Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr. They have some pretty prominent names on the defensive side of the ball, so something wasn't clicking, something had to change, and now Jim Harbaugh comes in. with his own ideas, just really focused around the run. I just think it has to do with that mentality and that attitude about being tough, being physical, more physical than maybe Austin Ekeler just doesn't fit the mold of anymore. Or I wouldn't say anymore. I don't think he really did fit that mold anyway, just because he is a little bit of a smaller back, and based on the stats that I read before, he had a lot of scrimmage yards, so he got a lot of his productivity from the passing game, and that's where I wanted to take this next point. Going off of what you said, Eric, and mentioning now with Washington, he's looked upon now, I think, more as a complementary piece to Brian Robinson, and Brian Robinson is going to be the one getting the 200-plus carries, getting the goal line looks. If it's a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, Brian Robinson's most likely going to be there. If it's an obvious running situation, it's probably going to be him, maybe a play action or an option play with Jaden Daniels, because Jaden Daniels can now run the ball. And Austin Ekeler maybe isn't looked upon as that running back anymore that can get that amount of a workload and still look as efficient as he has in the past. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think people have to garner their expectations a little bit to now accept the fact that he's going to be in there more so on the passing downs, more of a change of pace running back for the Washington Commanders. And he could become a great weapon for Jaden Daniels, because I think he's a great route runner. He's great in the passing game. So if he's able to line up in different spots other than just the backfield, maybe in the slot or lining up outside and getting him in a motion, maybe a jet sweep or some very different variations of what you can use Austin Ekeler at, because he is a smaller guy, like I mentioned. He's only 29, so it's not like he is on the wrong side of, 30 or 32 years old where you question his ability, his durability. He's still at a premium age for a running back, just right at the top of where you would want them. And I think he could do that. I think that's more so his role now with the Commanders, and that's the capability, that's sort of the ceiling that I can see how Austin Ekeler can get to and really maximize his talents now with the Washington Commanders, because he can add a different just aspect to this team out of the backfield, a check down option for Jaden Daniels if everything else is covered. If a linebacker's trying to cover him, they're going to struggle. If a safety's on him, they're also going to struggle. He's very shifty, and like I mentioned, his low center of gravity makes it very tough for anybody to bring him to the ground. And he could develop a good connection with Jaden Daniels that way and still be a prominent figure, just not so much as a bell cow running back like maybe Jim Harbaugh is trying to implement with the Los Angeles Chargers. You saw them bring in Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, already coming from that system with the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, it's Jim Harbaugh's brother. They would have similar philosophy, so that doesn't surprise many people, I would think. So it is just, I think it just comes down to realizing the fact that Austin wasn't going to fit there anymore. And how confident am I now that he can be at least a very positive contribution to this Commanders team? I think I would probably say I'm at 70%, 80% that he is able to still do this. It's going to look different, and he won't be the out-and-out starter, but again, that's all right. If people could just change their expectations for Austin Ekeler, maybe not look at him like the old Austin Ekeler of 2021 and 2022, they're still going to fit their mold of this running back that is still excelling in his role now, rather than just being this all-out number one running back that doesn't just fit the mold anymore, in all honesty. Eric, do you think the Commanders should have kept Sam Howell as a backup just in case Jaden Daniels gets injured or doesn't perform up to par? It's funny because I was surprised when Sam Howell moved on, and I didn't really understand it just because I almost thought among those same lines. I didn't think he did bad. I think more so than not, it was the team that was around him that didn't really help him too much. So I was surprised when they traded him or he just moved on to the Seattle Seahawks. But you pretty much get the same thing with Marcus Mariota that's there now. I know I mentioned that it wasn't all Sam Howell's fault, but it was also Sam didn't do too much to really put himself out there and make it a tough decision for the Commanders to think twice about it. Because he didn't perform too well, he didn't really have too many splash plays. I think it made it an easier decision for the Commanders to just get another quarterback on a veteran minimum deal in Marcus Mariota, to just keep in there instead of Sam Howell. It'll be cheaper. They don't have to pick up no fifth-year option. Maybe they weren't going to do it anyway, but you pretty much get the same thing with Marcus Mariota. So either one, if they kept him or not, it was probably just going to have the same role, be the same sort of idea with Mariota or Sam Howell. But I was definitely surprised, as were you, in that situation. But that's what the Commanders can sort of expect from Austin Ekeler and what his new role could be. He's not going to be this bell cow running back anymore. He's going to be more of a change of pace, a very ideal number 2, in all honesty, if we're talking in all reality. He could be that guy. If he could stay healthy, I have all the confidence in the world that he could be a great asset to this team in Washington, because they need difference makers. They need dynamic players like he can provide. So that'll be something to watch in 2024. But that'll wrap it up for that segment. We're going to continue on with the show, and after this next break that we have in store, we're going to come back and talk about the Cleveland Browns, their contract situation with their number 1 receiver, Amari Cooper, holding out so far through this offseason. He wants a contract extension. Will it get done, and how much will this wide receiver now get in a booming wide receiver market this offseason? Stay tuned to find out how much I think he'll get after this break. Don't go anywhere.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Moving right along with the rest of the show, and now talking back on the contracts, this time in Cleveland, we're going to stop by and talk about Amari Cooper entering the final year of his 5-year, $100 million deal that he signed back in 2020 when he was still with the Dallas Cowboys. Then you make that trade over to the Cleveland Browns, and they have to take on that salary now. And it has a base salary of $20 million, which means very cheap. Obviously now in this day and age, with this market just growing, it seems like every other month, or every month I should say, that we go deeper into this offseason. And that also means that 9 wide receivers currently make more in 2024 than Amari Cooper. Just some names to throw out there: Michael Pittman, Devontae Smith, Nico Collins, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle. Those type of guys are very much up there in the wide receiver rankings of the highest paid wideouts in the NFL. And arguably, Amari Cooper has put out a very good sample size out there to show why, once he gets his new contract extension, because I do believe he will get it, he has put himself in the best situation where he can really leverage a good amount, maybe more so than a lot of people would think, because he arguably had the best season of his career in 2023. If you look at it, he had 72 receptions, which was a career high, or actually a career high in yards, I should say, at 1,250. 5 touchdowns, including a Week 15 performance where he had 11 receptions, a franchise record in Cleveland of 265 yards, and 2 touchdowns to add on to that, and became the second player ever with 200-plus yard receiving games for 3 different teams in his career. A lot of accolades there, a lot of numbers I just threw out there, but a very good resume building for Amari Cooper to put out there on the negotiation table and say, you can't find this anywhere, and you guys should probably pay me a good amount of money in 2024 or with the next contract extension. 4 of his last 5 seasons have been over 1,100 yards and at least 68 receptions in each of those years, and also at least recording 5 touchdowns in 4 of his last 5 years. So he has been doing this for a while with his time with Dallas, continuing it on in Cleveland. There's only 1 year in the last 5 years where he put up less than 1,000 yards, and I think he was still at 900 or 800. So the standard is very much up there for Amari Cooper, another underrated number 1 wide receiver that probably doesn't get the amount of attention that he should for how important he is to this Cleveland Browns team. And so far, now before they got Jerry Jeudy, he was pretty much the only certified and validated number 1 true receiving option that they had. And all the other guys weren't really up to par, in my opinion. He really carried the load for them in that offense and being that go-to guy whenever they needed a big play. He was always pretty much open. And now that you got Jerry Jeudy, you hope to get a little bit more out of him. You have a very good running game, so I guess that sort of negates the fact that it was only Amari Cooper. David Njoku broke out a little bit more this year, so that's another positive. So even with all those circumstances, Amari Cooper has continued to perform year in and year out. So what does that mean for a contract extension? How much could Amari Cooper now get? How much is he worth in this day and age in the wide receiver market? Before I give my opinion on it, the Cleveland general manager Andrew Berry still considers Amari Cooper a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver in his words, and isn't too worried about the holdout that Amari Cooper has been going through so far this offseason. He said sometimes all teams have periods like this where they go through this type of situation, but it does not change our affinity for Amari Cooper. And he said that Amari is a big part of their team and a big part of their culture that they want to continue to build on in 2024 and in years moving on from that. And if we're talking about any team who isn't worried too much about throwing guaranteed money or just throwing a lot of money at their players, especially ones that deserve it, imagine them giving a contract to someone that has proven it for their team, has been a consistent option for them year in and year out. When they've given contracts to Deshaun Watson, who didn't even play a snap before they gave him $230 million, fully guaranteed, an NFL record for guaranteed money to a quarterback. They gave him that amount of money without even playing a single snap for them for their organization. Then you look at Jerry Jeudy, another player of theirs that got a contract extension before he even stepped foot on the practice field for the Cleveland Browns. He got an extension right away. So how much are they willing to throw at Amari Cooper now that has proven year in and year out that he is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL? How much could this grow up to? That is a interesting point, especially with some of the factors that I had listed out here. There's no doubt in my mind, first and foremost, that this will get done. It'll probably be for 3 to 4 years, excuse me. For 3 to 4 years, and I would say it could probably reach 26 to 28, maybe not 28, maybe 27, maybe 26 to $27 million per year, I would say, for Amari Cooper, because now he is going to be 30 years old, or he already turned 30 years old, so that, you don't want to say that hinders him, because, I think a lot of players will say that age doesn't really matter when you're still performing year in and year out, but if you're going to give him a 4-year deal at that high of a salary because he's earned it based on what he has done, you still have to take into account what he can become, what can he still produce in 4 years, 3 years, for however long you extend him to. Amari has done a great job so far, but can he sustain this level of productivity and still be worth $28, $27 million? That raises some eyebrows, I'm sure. So that's another factor. And unfortunately for him, the age, at least for me, makes me pause a little bit when I'm thinking about what value I can put on Amari Cooper. And if you're thinking about giving him a contract around what Jalen Waddle got, for example, at $28 million per year, it does factor into that, because Jalen, I don't know how old he is right off the top of my head. I would probably have to guess maybe 24, 25 at the oldest. Now he's getting a new 3-year deal, and he's only going to be 28, 29 years old by then. He could get another extension by then, but right now he's getting paid as one of the highest paid wide receivers, and based on what he has done so far, you can pay him that because the next time he's up for a contract, most likely he's probably going to be even better than he is right now. So that's a good way of doing it. That's just has to do a lot with where they are in their career. And Amari, now on the age of 30, moving on past that, the whole situation with Deshaun Watson as well, he's getting a lot of money going his way. So how does that affect it with maybe other contract negotiations that they have to get to at some point, I would imagine. I don't know how it is currently standing, but with that team, I know Denzel Ward is up there for one of the highest paid corners in the league. Deshaun Watson's up there for one of the highest paid quarterbacks. And if you put a lot of money invested in Amari, how does that, balance out the books later on? It is something they have to think about and certainly take into account with some of the negotiations that they gonna have to go off of. But also, on the flip side, if they wait too long a little bit, he is on the last year of his deal, like I mentioned, in 2024. So say they let that play out and really, put it out there that they want Amari Cooper to go out there and do it again and really validate them, giving him $27, $28 million per year. On the flip side, if they decide to go that route and wait it out another year into the offseason, not only is he able to become a free agent and maybe then you could lose him, the price of paying these wide receivers could go up again, and then maybe now you're paying closer to 30 instead of the 27 to 26 million dollars potentially that you could pay right now. So that is something that they have to take into account, something that any team has to take into account with how the wide receiver market is just exploding. Eric says the Cleveland Browns, especially after last season's playoff appearance, have always been just a quarterback away. Watson wants Cooper bad. Will Watson be willing to restructure his monumental contract? I think he should be. I know those talks haven't really happened as of yet, but I think after this year, they're not going to ask him to take a massive pay cut or anything like that. But I think it's not like they realize it now, but they have been knowing that this could become a situation where they might have to restructure it with giving any player that amount of money. It always seems like at one point they're going to have to restructure their deal. Deshaun Watson won't be any different, but now if he goes out there again and maybe gets injured again or just doesn't perform very well, not only do you have to really think about that contract, but then you have all the pressure from the media talking day in and day out how could they have paid him this much? Look what he's doing out there on the field. They're really close. I will acknowledge the fact that the Browns are right there. They made the playoffs last year with Joe Flacco at quarterback coming in and playing, I think, 5 to 6 games and going crazy in those regular season games and still making the playoffs. It just shows you how talented this team really is, like you mentioned, Eric, and it really is just on Deshaun Watson. And I don't want to keep coming on here and talking about how important this season is for Deshaun, but you can't really spin it a different way other than that because they have Denzel Ward, they have Myles Garrett, Amari Cooper. Nick Chubb got hurt last year, but he was well on his way for another 1,000-yard rushing season. David Njoku broke out this year. You really go all in and bring in Jerry Jeudy. You have to have these players now hold up their end of the bargain, especially when that one player is getting paid $230 million guaranteed. That's just the basis of it. I think that's just the plain facts of this whole situation. And Deshaun, it's hard to say that he just doesn't play good anymore. He just doesn't have that talent. I don't think that's realistic. They have to get it out of him. He's stuck in a little bit of a rut right now, but you can't get a better situation than the Cleveland Browns in terms of team buildup, you having everything in place for you to succeed. It really does come down to Deshaun Watson now. You can't control injuries, obviously, but the patience of the fan bases in Cleveland, in Pittsburgh, in New York doesn't run the longest, so they've already been waiting 2 years. This year will certainly be the pivotal year, in my opinion, and those restructuring talks for Deshaun Watson will be coming up, I'm sure, as early as next offseason or at some point during this regular season. But Amari Cooper will get an extension. I think he's worth right now $26 to $27 million, and I expect the Browns to extend him. They frankly need him a lot out there on offense if they want to get the best out of Deshaun. So it's going to get done. How much they pay him. Will they go over that? Leave your guys' thoughts in the comments section. Is Amari Cooper worth more maybe than $28 million in your guys' opinion? But we're going to move on. Still on wide receivers that we've been talking about, but this time talking about a new wide receiver potentially in the Miami Dolphins. Who are they looking upon now to take that next step as a wide receiver, and how much could that help their offense competing with the Jets, the Bills, maybe not so much the Patriots, but you guys get the idea. We're going to talk about that after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping back into the show now and continuing on with the theme of wide receivers from the last segment talking about Amari Cooper. Now we're talking about De'Von Achane with the Miami Dolphins. I know he is a running back. What the heck am I talking about? Well, that is where this story now comes up with the Miami Dolphins, and it's no secret they have a very talented roster, a very talented offense in the skill-based position players that they have with Raheem Mostert, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, OBJ now coming over. It is a boatload of talent out there. I'll throw Tua in there as well. He's a very talented player. It's hard for anybody else to get on the field and still have a positive or a prominent contribution to this team. That's where De'Von Achane comes in. You know, as a rookie, he still performed very well. Had a very good rookie season, actually. Recording 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, added almost 200 receiving yards to that. So really a 1,000-yard from scrimmage year for Achane in that first year as a rookie, and only had 27 receptions. To record almost 200 yards is pretty efficient, to say the least, and what tops it all is his speed. He's extremely fast, as if the Miami Dolphins needed more speed out there with Hill, Waddle, and Raheem Mostert. He certainly adds a lot to this offense, but again, it's hard to get him out there on the field if he's playing only running back and trying to only spot Raheem Mostert, because he is the number one running back, and how can he not be? He just had the best year of his career, so Achane might not get a lot of looks at running back, but you want to have him out there because he is just frankly fast, and he can change the game in an instant for this Miami Dolphins team. So, with that being said, and having the season that Raheem Mostert has had, at running back, the Dolphins also have Chris Brooks, Jeff Wilson, Jalen Wright, who they also drafted. Very crowded room at running back, so it's difficult to get meaningful carries there for the Miami Dolphins. So because of that, we're looking at maybe changing the position a little bit, changing the approach to De'Von Achane, because in his rookie year, of his 300 snaps that he received, 100 were out of the slot or out wide as a wide receiver. Only Cordell Patterson lined up outside of the backfield on a larger percent of his snaps compared to De'Von Achane and 68 other running backs who had at least 50 carries. It's something that the Dolphins have communicated to De'Von Achane this year or this offseason to try and have him on the field more. They're going to have to try and take advantage of these resources and try to take advantage of his skill set to try and learn maybe a little bit more of a new position to be a more meaningful contributor in 2024. And Achane, talking about this during mandatory minicamp last week, had this to say: I was going out there running routes with them when they weren't here, meaning Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I did that with them. Basically, why not? Our receiver room is one of the greatest, and if I want to do the stuff they want me to do, might as well take tips and learn from them. And head coach Mike McDaniels has also mentioned previously that Achane's familiarity with the team's offense more so now in his second year, allows him and allows the team to try and experiment with him at the wide receiver position. And I think it's a great strategy. It's a great resource to use, especially like De'Von Achane said, learning from a Tyreek Hill. Similar build there, by the way, because Achane, I don't know exactly how they measure with each other in terms of height, but they almost look the same out there. Same build, shorter stature. They're not long, lanky guys like a Michael Pittman or a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a George Pickens like that. They're very unique in how they're built, and so they have that going for them. A great learning tool there for De'Von Achane and even Jalen Waddle as well. All these fast guys that they can have out there, very quick twitch, quick get off. It is all there. You just have to mold it now in more so of a wide receiver way of doing it rather than a running back, and all the little nuances that come with receiving the carry, looking up, finding a hole, and sort of going off of the blockers. Now as a wide receiver, you have to read soft spots in zone coverage, beating man coverage, beating press coverage, all those sort of stuff. It just takes muscle memory. And I love the fact that they obviously have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle to work off of in that department. So that's very great for De'Von Achane. One, to learn from that and also take advantage of this opportunity if you're Mike McDaniels, because you have all this talent rather than just saying, we're just going to try and incorporate him here. And we don't want to put him in a weird situation with changing his position. He does the opposite, tells Achane that if he wants to contribute more, maybe try and learn a little bit more of wide receiver, and that way we can take advantage of all the great opportunity that we have on offense. And it made me think now with Achane possibly being out there receiver, you already have Tyreek and Jalen out there who you have to keep two deep safeties back there or else you're going to get burnt down the field. Now you have Achane who also can take the top off a defense. Does this make the Miami Dolphins have the best offense in the AFC East, or at least the most diverse offense in the AFC East? Because I know the Jets are highly talked about with Garrett Wilson entering now as a very clear-cut number one receiver. Mike Williams also there to complement him in New York. Now you have Aaron Rodgers there, obviously. Breece Hall is another one that a lot of people are expecting a massive jump from in 2024. So that offense is pretty prolific. Then you look at the Buffalo Bills. It's not like in years past with Stephon and Gabe Davis, but I really like Keon Coleman. I think their two tight ends are very efficient. And Khalil Shakir, that's who I couldn't think of yesterday. Khalil Shakir is another wide receiver that they use very well in their offense, and it just fits what they're trying to do. So they don't have a bad offense. They have a different one that's pretty efficient as well. So now you look at the Miami Dolphins, and I would certainly say, in my opinion, I think they have definitely the most diverse, the one that you could do a lot with that isn't very typical of many offenses around the NFL, just based off the fact that you could line up Tyreek Hill anywhere. They have probably the most amount of motion in the league, I would have to guess. If it's not the 49ers and if it's not the Chiefs, like I mentioned in the last video, I would have to guess it would be the Miami Dolphins just because Mike McDaniel comes from that system. So you can line up Tyreek anywhere. Jalen can line up anywhere. Raheem Mostert, you have to account for his speed out of the backfield and maybe lining him up anywhere. Now you have De'Von Achane, who is very much similar to all these guys who he could line up anywhere. And the defense now has to account for three guys with below 4.24 speed, I would have to imagine. With Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and Achane, and even Raheem Mostert as well out of the backfield. You have to keep guys close or else he's going to burn you on the outsides as well. So it's going to be a nightmare, and I think just based on that reason and the fact that you can't teach speed, when you have speed out there, I haven't been out there with people, with human beings as fast as these guys, but I can only imagine what it feels like seeing having Tyreek Hill right in front of you, trying to put your hands on him, and then one quick move, and he gains 20 to 15 yards of separation in probably like 3 to 2 seconds. It's insane what just speed alone can do for a wide receiver and how much better it can make you out there. Achane already has that to his benefit just naturally as an athlete, so just trying to learn the little nuances is going to take time, but I'm very excited to see this for the Miami Dolphins, how creative they get in using Achane, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle out there. I would probably say they have the best offense in the AFC East. Does that make them the favorites in the AFC East? Not for a lot of people, but I think, to me, I would put them first in the AFC East this year. I really like how their offense is built. Are they going to extend Tua? That's a whole different conversation, and how he could change this whole dynamic of this team if he's not there. But they have a good thing going. I love Achane there, especially with OBJ coming in, and this is the last thing I'll say on this segment. There is some doubts with Odell if he could still contribute in a positive way. Could he be a pretty good number 3 option for the Dolphins? And now with Achane being out there as another receiving option, I think it takes more of the pressure off of Odell, because he might not, he definitely isn't as fast as those 3 guys are. So everybody else is worried about these 3 speed demons out there, and OBJ can just sort of wander around the middle, find those soft spots, and be a great weapon again for Tua Tagovailoa. It's very exciting if you're a Miami Dolphins fan. I think they're going to just have a better year than they did offensively last year, and it's hard to say that with how good Tua was, with how Tyreek was in the regular season. But now can they do one step more and get better in the playoffs? That's yet to be determined, but definitely the excitement is there for this team. And on that note, we're going to take a break. And when we return after this ad break, we're going to come back and talk about just a recap of the best remaining free agents out there, the top 5 remaining free agents, and where I think they best fit and what they could bring to a team if they were to be signed in the remainder of this offseason. So don't go anywhere. We have one more segment to get to after this break. Welcome back here to the last segment on the show to recap some best remaining free agents out there on the market. It isn't like there isn't no options out there, that no one's signing any of these players. I'm pretty surprised that a good amount of these guys are still remaining out there for teams to sign. So I thought I'd recap it here a little bit. We haven't talked about free agents in a while, and there's still some good names out there that I really believe can contribute a lot to any team that decides to sign them this offseason. And I know heading into training camp, I know after the draft, you really don't know what you have in these players currently. So I guess from one aspect, I can sort of understand why teams haven't signed them. But now once we get more into a more intense workout, more intense situations, you don't want to see injuries happen, but that's the reality. They do happen in training camp especially. So maybe you don't want to see it if somebody goes down. One of these guys could step in or just come in and help out any of these rosters right away. Starting off with my best remaining free agent right off the bat is Stephon Gilmore. 34 years old. It might scare a few people, but not really myself, because he played all 17 games last year for the Dallas Cowboys. And right now, about a market value for a guy of his caliber with 34 years old, taking that into account, probably you're looking around $10 million to $12 million per year, I would have to guess. According to Spot Rack, they have their market value for Stephon Gilmore at about 9 to 10. So anywhere from that range, I think any of these teams could be looking to try and sign him for a 1-year salary, I think would be most likely. His resume speaks for himself. He is still a number one corner, in my opinion, in this league. Has 5 Pro Bowls. You're talking about a Defensive Player of the Year, All-Pro selection. He definitely still has a year or two left at that level, and then past that, I don't know how his contract situation will pan out, but for right now, I think he certainly can help a lot of teams out there. But the best ones that I thought of were the New York Jets, lining him up across from Sauce Gardner, would be one of the best duos in the National Football League. Also in that same division, the Buffalo Bills, after moving on from Tre'Davious White. I know they have Kaiir Elam, but other than that, it's still a little bit shaky there, so I think he could fit there with them. The Jacksonville Jaguars, again, maybe it's just me and my lack of knowledge around the Jacksonville Jaguars, but at corner, I don't think they have too many prominent names there. And also the Cincinnati Bengals, after moving on from Chidobe Awuzie. Again, don't really have too many experienced guys there. I think he could certainly help out in that department. In a AFC North where you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, George Pickens, and Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, all these guys, you're going to need a good corner to combat that, and I think the Bengals are certainly lacking in that department, but he is number one. I think he should probably be signed the quickest, but moving on from him, another guy in the secondary, Justin Simmons. With him, 30 years old, an expensive contract, so that might scare a few people away, but with the safety market and not really being, at least in terms of free agents, not being of the highest priority for a lot of teams, that seems like another devalued position more and more in the NFL. But Justin Simmons still, I think, could bring a lot of good things to a team. He led the Denver Broncos in interceptions last year, considered one of the best at his position at one point in time, not too far away from where we are right now. So I think he still has a lot to give. He was arguably the leader and the quarterback on that defense for the Denver Broncos, and now they felt confident enough in Pat Surtain to move on from him, and also for salary cap reasons they had to move on. So it's not like it was for a lack of talent or a lack of just ability. He still has a lot to give. I think a team like the Indianapolis Colts, with how young they are in the secondary, bringing in a guy with Justin Simmons' experience can certainly help quarterback that team a lot better. The Jacksonville Jaguars, again, they brought in Darnell Savage. Having him alongside Justin Simmons could be very interesting for their secondary. And also the New York Jets, again, at safety. They have Chuck Clark and another player that I forgot the name of just now, but not too prominent in that position either. So bringing in Justin Simmons again, if they're going to go all in like they have already shown this offseason, I think bringing him in again would sort of reinforce that and just make them overall a lot better in an AFC that you're definitely going to need defensive help with how explosive it is on offense, dealing with, I don't have to name them, all the offensive players and great offensive players that you find yourself with in the AFC. So he's number 2 for me. At number 3, we have Connor Williams, showing some love to the offensive line. He is coming off a pretty severe ACL tear, so that's something that will scare off a lot of teams. But he is only 27 years old, and up until last year when he tore his ACL for the Miami Dolphins, he had only missed 2 games in 2020 through 2022 for the Dallas Cowboys and the Miami Dolphins. So durability really shouldn't be too much of a question. I know the ACL is its own category, so people are a little bit more sensitive around it, and for good reason. But I think he's at a very good age. He's able to play guard or center, so that just raises his stock even more. And to me, he fits in teams like the Denver Broncos. You bring in a new young quarterback in Bo Nix. Zach Wilson also trying to reinvigorate his career. Jared Stidham, if you want to throw him in there as well. You need someone with experience playing center at that position. I think Connor Williams can certainly help those guys out. Then you look at the Arizona Cardinals. Their offensive line hasn't been the greatest. He could fit in right away and just improve that line. Maybe if they already have a center somewhere along playing guard for them as well. And also the Washington Commanders. Similar to the Denver Broncos, Jaden Daniels. You bring in a guy of Connor Williams' capability. He already knows that division. The Commanders have already brought over Tyler Biadasz, so what's another former Dallas Cowboy to bring over with Dan Quinn? Playing guard or center, I think, would be his best bet, and he would definitely help out that young offense trying to make an improvement in 2024. Then, Xavier Howard, another former Dolphin, still very much capable to be a number one defensive back in this league. He has had some off-the-field issues that I'm not quite so sure I can mention on here for just the nature of it, so I won't be doing that. But if you guys are interested more on it, you guys can look it up. He has those things going, so I don't know how that does affect his availability and what those legal issues are, but that is something that could scare off teams away. He's 31 years old, has been dealing with some injuries, but I don't think it's been too severe where it really becomes a major problem. He could work around it, usually just ankle injuries, hamstring injuries, so it's not too big of a deal. And just what he did over his time with Miami, led the league in interceptions at one point as well. He could find himself very comfortably in teams like the Cardinals, who need a lot of defensive help. Also, the Los Angeles Rams. They brought in Tre'Davious White and Darius Williams. Xavier Howard could really round off this cornerback group and make them very tough to beat in coverage just overall. And also the Los Angeles Chargers. Other than Asante Samuel Jr., I don't think they have too many great options at corner. So pairing him up with Derwin James, Asante Samuel, with already Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack in there as well, I think it makes this team a lot more balanced on that side of the ball. So he's number 4. And the last guy I'll talk about is another one of the big guys, DJ Humphries, a starting left tackle, in my opinion, in this league. Only 30 years old, pretty young, or pretty much in that prime of left tackles. You have the experience, you still have the athletic and physical prowess out there to compete with some of these great pass rushers, especially when you're going up against Nick Bosa in that division. That actually might be the only one, or just that 49ers defensive line in general is very hard to deal with. He's coming from that experience, only released because of the salary cap and working out his contract they couldn't agree upon. So again, it wasn't for a lack of talent. And with him at left tackle, a very important position on that offensive line, he could start for a lot of teams in my opinion, and was one of the best offensive linemen for the Cardinals in general last year. So he's very much capable of starting, and I think the Chiefs is an interesting one because I know they drafted a left tackle, I want to say, at some point in this draft to try and fit in. They got rid of their starting left tackle last year in the Super Bowl, so I think bringing in DJ Humphries right away to just fill that gap and solidify that offensive line could be a great situation there. Also, the Washington Commanders, not too of a secure offensive line, and you definitely need that for Jaden Daniels. Protecting his blind side will certainly be something they could be interested in. And finally, the Green Bay Packers, because they also drafted a left tackle in the first round. I know a lot of Packers fans were pretty surprised by that, and they have a second-year left tackle right now penciled in to start. Comparing that to DJ Humphries, I don't think is much of a comparison. He could jump in right away and be their starting left tackle. And for that offense to have a anchor there at left tackle and not have to worry about that side of the line too much would be such a premium for a team that is really building on their momentum from last year to be a prominent team in 2024. But those are the top 5 remaining free agents in my opinion. Those are the ones that I think should get signed first and foremost, and that have made a good case for themselves to join any team and be a major contributor to any team in 2024. But that's my list. Let me know if I missed out on someone or if I just had them in the wrong order, or what your guys' thoughts are on team fits for any of the players that I just mentioned in my list. But with that being said, that will wrap it up for us on today's show of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Please remember to follow the show and the network all over social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok for more of the network's content. And also, if you want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube for a lot more content around the NFL. And as a final reminder, Tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more football discussions and NFL conversations with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you guys for joining me on today's show, and I'll expect to see you guys all back here again to wrap up the week with me again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.